En Camino with Kit Hogg.
It's been a while since we've spoken to our American correspondent, during which we've witnessed that election. The greatest political comeback in American history, resulting in the most devastating defeat ever suffered by the Democratic Party. Like all history, a period of time after the event needs to elapse to establish any kind of perspective. 3 weeks is not a long time, but we couldn't wait any longer. Andy Woods, welcome in Camino.
Hey, thank you, kids. Good to hear your voice.
She was so personable. She was so sweet. She was attractive, and he became increasingly more obnoxious to the extent that I thought, right, that's it. He has blown it. He is no longer electable. No one in their right mind could vote for him. The MAGAs, yes, but no one remotely sensible. And yet, as Obama put it, Trump gave the Democrats a shellacking. Incidentally, do you know what the origin of shellacking? Do you know what that means?
Yes, I think it's an old form of varnish.
Yes.
Yes, so I'm not quite sure. I guess put the finishing touches to, I guess.
No, well, I heard that they used to shellac bodies, dead bodies, as a preservative, as a sort of mummification. That you dip them in shellac.
Well, possibly.
So anyway,
a little above my pay grade.
Well, so let's go back to the election. Anyway, I mean, the shellacking. What happened? Was it all grocery prices?
I think that your opening remarks were mirrored what a lot of people here felt as well. She's reasonable. She's intelligent. She was a reasonable, prosecutor. The Californians voted her in twice as Attorney General. She prosecuted criminals. At the same time, he was being convicted and seemingly getting more unhinged. If you read some of his speeches were average 75 minutes long, and they would just be a word salad. It was very strange. So,
absolutely.
Yes. But again, you're correct. It was grocery prices. 9 out of 10 people coming out of the polling stations, in one poll I read, said it was the price of their basket in the grocery store. And that was something that she didn't focus on. And I think that her lawyer training didn't serve her well. She was very roundabout in answering questions when she was interviewed on TV. So they would say, so what are you going to do about lowering prices? And she would start by saying, I was born in a middle-class family. We mowed our own lawns. Yeah, and just would sort of do this kind of
you did
weird
what?
biography.
You mowed your own lawn? Wow.
Yeah, it's just very
tough.
Strange.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Had it really tough. So there wasn't, and then I think that the Republicans ran a brilliant last week with the line, "She's for they them, he's for you," which really sort of summed up a lot of people's feelings that, well, the Democrats are really focusing on social issues, on abortion, on trans rights, on gay rights, and I can't afford to put gas in my tank.
Yeah, so there's a kind of come home to Donald kind of thing. Along with the price increases. I mean, rents apparently went up 30%, milk went up 25%, beef went up 45%. I mean, that there's a big economy factor here, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that a lot of things are in your face, and a lot of things are under the surface. The stock market was way up. So if you have a 401k, which is a retirement stock-based retirement plan here, you've done very, very well. If you own your own home, you've done very well. So if you were looking for a job, you've done well. Unemployment was down. So these gross sort of macro figures were doing very, very well under the Biden administration. But if you were just looking at what you spent on a Friday to feed the family, then it was different. So
yeah, do you think
it was coming down? Inflation was coming down, and the Fed had started reducing interest rates, which is a sign that inflation is they're on top of inflation. And gross domestic product was, I think, at around 3%, which was, a lot of European companies would love to have the GDP. The dollar's stronger than it's ever been, but those are kind of, if you like, even though they're very tangible, they're almost intangibles in your everyday life.
The personalities, though, that's what interests me. It seems to me that Trump, cartoonesque, larger than life, he was charismatically more authentic somehow.
It's odd, isn't it, that an East Coast billionaire elite can be seen as a sort of bastion of the working class.
Yeah, very clever. Very clever.
It's a remarkable trick. Remarkable trick he pulled. But I think the other thing was, so you've got the economy and the prices, but the other thing was that the border has been, you see these photographs of, 10, 12,000 people a day coming across the border, just pouring across the border, overwhelming the asylum system, unaccompanied children, an estimated 13,000 convicted murderers. And Kamala Harris would never take any ownership. She could have said, hey, we didn't like the Trump policy of separating families. We thought that was inhumane. We tried a different approach. It hasn't been successful. We're going to address it. She could have said that, like a grown-up, but it was a lot of blah, blah. We didn't do anything wrong, and yet you see on TV just people just pouring across the border.
Is that actually happening, and is that, sorry to interrupt you, is that actually happening?
Yes.
People are pouring across the border?
Yes.
Right.
And have been throughout the Biden administration. Now, there's a lot of deportations that never, ever get mentioned. Obama was the biggest deporter. So they're trying to manage it, but they haven't been successful. But they wouldn't admit that they hadn't been successful, and they were changing course. She basically, her fundamental message was, I'm not changing course. I'm sticking with Joe Biden's policies. That's what we're doing. Where I think she would have done herself a favor if she had distanced herself a little bit from some of, particularly the immigration policies.
What was
and then we do hear that, she's black and she's female, and America's not ready for that. And I don't think I think there is misogyny and there is racism, but I think there's a lot of votes too, because she's white and because she's black and because she's female. So I don't know if they counteract each other out.
Although
those are factors.
46% of women voted for Trump. So she didn't. She didn't cream the female. She didn't actually cream the female vote at all.
No, and what was really strange was it was across all demographics: young women, Hispanic women, black women. It was all voting demographics went for Trump, and I think they were just thinking that yes, he's not a godly man, but he reduces prices and he'll stop all these people coming into the country illegally.
So immigration was a big factor, was it?
I would say it was a very close number two behind everyday economics.
Okay, let me put it to you that there was another factor, that somehow men and young men feel disenfranchised and undervalued in America by woke. Young men not knowing what manhood means. So the cultural element how much of a part did that play? I mean, the issue, slogans like defund the police, the pronouns issue, the Me Too, the Black Lives Matter, trans issues, biological men in women's bathrooms. I mean, actually, is America really like that?
No, it's very much overplayed. It is something that the Republicans have done a good job of flag waving about, but I don't think there's a national crisis among men. But there is definitely a feeling that the Democrats focus far too much on trans issues and just general social issues rather than financial, shopping basket issues.
Okay. Almost a year ago, I bought the January 2024 edition of The Economist. And it's always interesting reading the predictions of periodicals at the onset of a year later. And I quote from the leader column of that edition of The Economist, January 2024, this was. And the article is headed, "Next Year's Great Danger. A shadow looms over the world." In this edition, we published The World Ahead 2024, our 38th annual predictive guide to the coming year. And in all that time, no single person has ever eclipsed our analysis as much as Donald Trump eclipses 2024. That a Trump victory next November is a coin toss probability is beginning to sink in. Trump 2 would be more organized than Trump 1. True believers would occupy the most important positions. Mr. Trump would be unbound in his pursuit of retribution, economic protectionism, and theatrically extravagant deals. No wonder the prospect of a second Trump term fills the world's parliaments and boardrooms with despair. So what I want to talk to you about and now is those true believers who have started to appear as appointments to head departments in the new administration, or may offer some sort of indication of what to expect with regard to policies. So who are they? Who comes to mind when we talk about true believers in these positions?
Yeah, so I think it's worth just stepping back a little bit to the first Trump administration, where he had 44 different people in his cabinet. And when he would bring them in, they were the greatest, they were the smartest, they were the best. And then all of a sudden, he would fire them. Rance Previous, he left on a tarmac, wouldn't let him back on Air Force One.
Brilliant.
So it was.
You're walking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Get off. So, and out of those 44, only 4 supported him this time round, so they'd worked closely with him. So I think he learned from that. So as a general rule, the people that he's been appointing, who I heard the other day described as a bunch of nut jobs, have one consistent quality, and that is loyalty. Loyalty from day one.
Yeah, I was going to.
And the feeling is that anybody can do anything. You just get yourself a very competent assistant, a deputy, and then you can just be a figurehead. You don't really have to know much about defense. You don't have to know much about the economy. You can just go in and kick over the tables and fire a lot of people. So to name some of them, Matt Gaetz, a congressman from Florida who's very right wing. His own party don't like him. He was in a small cadre called the Freedom Caucus who voted out their own leader last year. He's been charged with transporting minors across state lines to have sex. So he has a really terrible reputation, and
he's been nominated as Attorney General, hasn't he? Which is like the main policeman kind of thing.
And in the past, he said he wants to abolish the FBI and drive out all the terrible people who are against Trump in the Department of Justice. So that's the sort of classic. It's unlikely that he will get that job because it has to go through Senate confirmation.
Yeah.
And there's enough members of his own party who won't vote for him. The Senate is very evenly split. The Republicans have a majority, but they only need 3 or 4 Republicans to vote with the Democrats, and he won't be approved. But the fact that he was nominated is really like just putting a finger up to everybody else and saying, he was loyal to me. And
absolutely. Suck on this.
Yeah, exactly.
Really.
Exactly.
What about? I'm intrigued by Chris Wright, who's the head of energy, who's been quoted as saying there is no climate crisis and there's no need for any energy transition. Drill, baby, drill.
Yeah. He's one of the many people of that stripe. He was a CEO, and let's just say, if we're being kind, he brings new views on climate change. Let's say that, a new perspective.
Right.
He was CEO of a company called Liberty Energy. So he was, if you like, poacher turned gamekeeper right now.
Okay.
His whole career has been in the energy business, so at least he has some credentials, right? He does at least know about power generation and providing power. So that sets him apart from the others. But yes, he is, I would say, a climate skeptic.
And then we got Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy, conspiracy theories, and indicted for previously dumping a bear carcass in New York Central Park.
Yeah, and having a brain worm.
What's a brain worm, man?
Every time, he started to run as a third party, right, as an independent. Actually, he was still on the ballot. He couldn't get off the ballot. He was still on the ballot in New Jersey. And then I don't know if he was polling like 7-8%, like third parties often do get interest and people kind of engage with them. They say, oh yeah, the other two are terrible. So he was sort of doing okay. And he complained that the media weren't giving him a fair shot. But every time they reported about him, it was negative. It was the bear carcass. It was him having telephone sex with this reporter. And then he reported that at one point he had a brain worm, a very rare parasitic infection in his skull.
This was as an excuse for some bad behavior or just a general condition?
No, not really. It just came out. He just sort of talked about it. It was very weird. But then, his campaign crashed and burned. His vice president, she put in $4 million, but it still wasn't going anywhere. So he threw his lot in with Trump, and for that he got rewarded with what he wanted, which is he's a lawyer, he's not a doctor, but he's railed against big pharma, against the FDA, against NIH, against CDC, against vaccines. He backpedaled on vaccines. He was definitely an anti-vaxxer, but when he started to run, he said, no, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm pro-safe vaccines. So
okay.
he
right.
modified his position to be a little more palatable.
Okay. A name that we've all heard of and could do with some extrapolation, Elon Musk. What is his role?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think Thunder-in-Chief might be
right.
part of it. He put in, I think, $70 million into the campaign. And so now he and another crazy guy, Vivek Ramaswamy, are being put in charge of something about government efficiency. So they're going to go and fire a bunch of bureaucrats, basically.
Is there anyone in the team? Sorry to interrupt you, man. But is there anyone in the team that gives the average liberal a degree of hope?
Not right
is there
now.
a grown up in the room?
They say that the guy they've just that the congressmen have just voted in. I'm sorry, that the Senate have just voted in as their leader is a reasonable person. That he is somebody possibly they could work with.
Who is that? Who's
no,
that?
That is his name is on the tip of my tongue.
Oh, okay. The leader of the Senate,
and it will come to me. It'll come to me.
No worries,
it was Mitch McConnell for 100 years, and then just in this last week, he was voted out. And what's his name? Who's just escaping me right now?
The tip of the tongue,
John Thune. John Thune.
John Thune. Thank you, Alex. Well done.
So he's a name you've never heard of. I'd never heard of him, but they say that he's not. He was sort of against Trump early on, and he's modified that position obviously, but he's not a complete MAGA head.
Okay. Not bonkers. Good. And that's enough of politics. Is there anything else you want to tell us about that's happening over the pond that we could finish on a lighter apolitical note?
Well, there was, amongst all this mayhem and brouhaha, there was the second congressional hearing on UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, which some of the cabinet appointees have been very engaged with, not least Mark Rubio from Florida and Matt Gaetz. Actually, they both said we need more transparency and disclosure. The Department of Defense is hiding spaceships that they've captured, and so there was a hearing on that where people went and gave evidence under oath that there were flying saucer recovery programs, and nobody actually showed a photograph or had any concrete evidence. But these were fairly high up people delivering testimony, a lot of which was, I was told that, not that I saw that. But anyway, it's quite interesting that the Congress is still looking to the skies to keep us safe from potential attack from other worlds.
Yeah, it could be a great unifying thing, couldn't it? The invasion of the aliens. It would bring us all together.
I would think so, yeah.
Bring clever political card to play.
Bring it on, E.T. Bring it on.
And that's all we have time for today. It's been a great pleasure as ever, and thank you so much for your perspective on that tectonic election.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity, Kit. I hope you and all the listeners have a great weekend.
I'm sure we will. Until next time, and that's Andy Wood, letter from New Jersey.